Welcome to the Acrylic Portrait Painting Challenge Masterclass, lesson number 6, creating smooth shading in skin tones. I hope you're doing well, and I'm looking forward to teaching this next step in the process of painting this portrait of Diane, our student here, holding the palette and with her beautiful smile. Hey, you've done a fantastic job. If you've been taking these series of lessons with me, I just want to give you high fives, and again, just say thank you so much for putting in the effort. Thank you so much for investing in yourself to be able to paint a portrait you can be proud of. And that's what we're here to do, to teach you how to paint a portrait you can be proud of so you can do that again and again and again. Whatever your goal is, whether you want to paint portraits of your grandchildren, whether you want to paint portraits on commission, or do portraits for exhibitions and win awards, whatever it might be, I'm happy to help you in that goal. So to that end, I want to encourage you, because we grow as a community together and iron sharpens iron. So I'd encourage you to post your portrait in our Realistic Acrylic Portraits Facebook group. And when you do that, that's going to actually help accelerate your progress, because you'll be getting feedback from other artists, and you'll be helping other artists too, encouraging them that they can do this as well. I have a critique actually every week now for the duration of this challenge while I'm recording it. And so if you want to get some extra feedback that way, enter your portrait into the critique. When you join that Facebook group, Realistic Acrylic Portraits, you'll see a space there ahead of Thursday when we have our live group critique on Zoom, and you'll get some additional help on your portrait so you know how to overcome any struggles. And you know, struggles are just part of the process. But when we overcome those struggles, it makes us a better artist and a better person, and you'll feel really good that you hung in there. In fact, I think about a student of mine in our All Access membership who, she does commission portraits now, and she was struggling with one of her clients, and well, I shouldn't say struggling with her client, but struggling with her portrait. And the client, you know, is seeing some things that need to be changed, and she's having some difficulty making those changes initially, trying to please the client. But she hung in there, and she persevered, and she made those changes, and her client told her, "I absolutely love it." And don't you just want to hear those words, you know, when you give a portrait as a gift to a loved one, or you do it on commission? Oh, I absolutely love it. Well, that's what her client told her. That's what her client told her. So I'm so proud of Peggy, and just to see that she hung in there, persevered, and boy, she's doing a fantastic job with her portraits now. She's grown a lot as an artist, and you can as well. So by finishing this challenge, you will be able to create a portrait you can be proud of, hang it on the wall, and be proud of it, and then do it again and again and again. That's my goal for you. But if you haven't even begun, you're not going to be able to do that. So if you are not signed up for the challenge yet, I encourage you, sign up for the Portrait Painting Challenge today. All right, it's simple, it's easy, and it's completely free to sign up. So go ahead and do that in the link below. There's a link that should flash across the screen, and also in the description of the video and in the top comment. So you can sign up at realisticacrylic.com/acrylic-portrait-painting-challenge. And when you sign up, I'll send you the welcome kit, and that's going to include everything you need to paint along with us. You'll get the reference photo, you get the supplies list, you get the palette layout guide, and all the masterclass lessons sent right to your email, so you never miss a single one. So go ahead and sign up below. We'll get you hooked up with everything you need to paint a portrait with us, and you can join the fun, and at the end of it, be able to say, "I painted a portrait I'm proud of." All right, now let's go ahead, before we dive into the lessons here, let's just open up with a word of prayer. I just always like to ask the Lord for his help. And we invite the master artist himself to help us create beautiful things just like he does. So, Father, we come before you in Jesus' name. Thank you for this opportunity to teach. I pray that you bless the students watching. I pray that you encourage them I pray that you would help them to overcome any challenges and to finish their portraits with confidence. I pray that this would just be a stepping stone, Lord, in their goal in portrait painting, whatever it might be. And I pray that they would use their gift to beautify the world around them, to touch and encourage other people. And Lord, I just pray that you would bless them as they do this challenge. In Jesus' name, help me to teach it well. Amen. All right, let's dive in here. We're going to begin by building up some more shading. We're going to be working on the face and the hair right now, so you can kind of see what's going on. In our last lesson, we finished up just by putting on a couple more layers, darkening the clothing, darkening the hair. We start off very simple here with this kind of Polaroid photo process of just taking a white canvas and slowly fading everything in using the historic acrylic glazing technique. Well, I should say the historic glazing technique, because there wasn't acrylics years and years ago, adapted for acrylics. And so that's what we're doing. We're mixing a little bit of paint with a lot of matte medium and just building up that shading and depth. So we're going to continue on in that process. We'll be working at least in step number 1 here on her hair and her face, kind of dialing in the features a little bit. And one thing I do want to point out before we get into the actual painting process, which we will very, very soon, is that the likeness, in your sketch doesn't necessarily have to be dialed in. Now, you want to get that sketch as close as you can, but here's that opportunity. If you didn't get the likeness dialed in your sketch like you wanted to, you can do that in the painting stage. And this is where we really pay attention to the distances between the eyes, nose, and mouth, the shapes of the individual features, and we just dial them right in and get them to look as much as we can like the reference photo. So I can see even in my own portrait, I didn't quite have it dialed in from the sketch, but I'm okay with that, because I know, Lord helping me, as I add more layers, I'll be able to really dial those nuances in and get that likeness and that realism to come alive. And so you can do the same thing. All right, so let's work on that. Let's go ahead and we'll take a I think we're gonna start a little bit more with a larger area. Now let's work on the hair, and then after that we'll work on the face. Let's go ahead and take some raw umber dark. We'll kind of set that off to the side here just a little bit by our mixing area with the matte medium, of course, in the middle. Now, if you followed along in the previous lessons, you know what colors we're using. They're all in the supplies list. If you don't have the supplies list, sign up for the challenge. I'll send it to you. You'll see it right there. But anyway, raw umber dark, a little bit of matte medium, and we're going to darken her hair a little bit. And I think that this color almost by itself will be good. Just raw umber dark and matte medium. We're making a glaze that's maybe about 90% opaque, so that would be 90% matte medium, 10% paint approximately. Let me show it to you on the white card here. This is what that glaze looks like right there. You can see that, and we'll just go ahead and start darkening a few choice areas on top of her hair. So let's do that. If you look at the reference photo, it's a little bit darker, like right here, and then they're a little bit right there and up there, and then right here it's a little bit darker too. Now there's a little bit of a lighter area. I'll kind of leave some room for that. So I'm looking at that reference photo and I'm saying what areas are light, what are darker. And I see this little area up here is lighter, so I didn't put a glaze there. You see, with this technique, you get the cumulative effect of layer upon layer, just like stained glass pieces stacked up on top of each other. And so areas where you want them to be lighter, you just don't hit them with glazes. It's kind of like you would with watercolor in a way. But you can also do some opaque layers at the end and lighten things up by adding a little bit of titanium white to the paint. We're not there yet in the process, but we will get there, and when we do, I'll show you how to do that. But I just want to kind of darken her hair in general. I am looking at the reference photo, seeing if there's any areas that are a little bit warmer in tone as well as being lighter. And because raw umber dark is a darker, well, it's a less saturated pigment. You see it's closer to black in color than, say, burnt sienna. Burnt sienna's got a little more of a reddish brown hue, and then we've got, you know, raw sienna, which is that kind of goldenrod hue, all the way to these vibrant colors over here like naphthyl red and organic pyrrole orange and Indian yellow. They're very vibrant. And so what I'm trying to say is that we want to basically put these less saturated colors, that's what it's called, colors that look closer to gray, in the areas that make sense based on what we see on the reference photo. And you got to really study that reference photo. I mean, not for like hours, but just, you know, study it for, you know, half a minute or so before you start painting. And while you're painting, just be constantly looking back and forth at it, just like I am here, as you can see me. And that's going to go a long ways. It's going to help you a lot. So many of my students, and I have students in the All Access membership of Realistic Acrylic Portrait School, and they have been with me for years now. I have some students that have been with me for years, and they're doing the same kind of thing. You know, they're studying their reference photo, they're looking back and forth, they're really relying on that visual information that the reference photo supplies, and they're doing outstanding portraits. Many of them, or I should say some of them on commission, many of them though doing portraits of their grandchildren and family members, sometimes even people in their community and their churches. They just want to bring encouragement to them. You know, it's just really a neat thing to see. Really a neat thing to see how people are using that gift that God has given them. So, I'm darkening, like I say, a few key areas. Here the color's a little warmer, so I have to be cognizant of that and not use that particular glaze too much. But I do have a darker area right here. As we look at the reference photo, you can see that right there, that particular shape. I want to recreate that shape and put that glaze right there. You have to almost, you know, even though you see so much information visually, you want to kind of isolate a shape in your mind and just see that specific shape and break it down to a more simple form and then render that onto your canvas. And that's what we do here. We take complex forms, and we take a complex photograph with all this visual information of the constituent parts, all the parts that compose it, that make it up, which would be your composition, your form, your anatomy, value, structure, color information, texture, detail. We kind of almost separate those items apart from each other in our minds, and then we reassemble them onto the canvas. And if you can train your mind to do that, it's going to go a long ways in being able to paint realistically. And that skill is something that can be learned, contrary to popular opinion, you know, that only a few people have an artistic gift or talent. That's not really true. Now, there are propensities, there are natural abilities to see these things in a portrait, in a reference photo, and render it. But that doesn't mean the average person, you know, that doesn't think they have that gift can't stir it up and get better at it. All right, so this ability to kind of see things in your mind's eye, see things in life or on a reference photo and render it, to some of my students it happens just like that. Other students, it takes longer. It takes months, even maybe a couple of years. But I do see a dramatic improvement over time with those students that have stuck with it, because as you practice anything, you're going to get better. All right. Just to give one additional metaphor, I'm going to do that while I'm actually painting here. Think of people who are gifted, let's say genetically, with really good bodies. You know, they can, they're just in shape, right? They just really look like they're in shape, and they're lean and all that kind of stuff. And some people, genetically have that kind of makeup in their body. You know, they naturally maybe have a faster metabolism. They have kind of a leaner build or whatever it is. And they can also, work out and things like that, and gain muscle, lose fat a lot faster than many of us do. But that doesn't mean the average person, or the person maybe with genetics that aren't as predisposed towards that, can't learn to, or I shouldn't say can't learn, but can't, through consistent practice, get into a decent shape, And so, like, for example, I'm trying to get in better shape, do a little bit of weightlifting, and I'm one of those guys that it takes a lot of effort for me to gain muscle. I've always been that way. That's my body's build. But I want to take care of the body I have, so that I can be around for my family, my children, later on my grandchildren. I can lift things without getting injured, just feel better, all those different things. So, I'm doing a little bit of weightlifting, and, I walk my dog on a daily basis. And, even though my genetic makeup is that it's hard for me to gain muscle, I'm still trying to do what I can do. So that's kind of my long lesson for you there, just to share something. All that to say that you can do it. You absolutely can. So the whole idea of talent, just kind of set that aside. Don't even say, well, do I have talent or do I not have talent? The question is this: do you have a desire? Do you have a desire to paint portraits? Because if you have a desire to paint portraits, or just do acrylic paintings in general, well, I believe God has given you that desire, and He provides a way for you to learn how to do it. And here we are. You're learning from me. So, the main thing is just having a desire, and then practice. You just have to continually practice and learn and get better and better at what you do. All right, so enough of, I'll step off of my soapbox here. We'll get back to the nuts and bolts of the painting process. Okay, we're going to darken this right-hand side here, and that's what we want to do, is get that right-hand side darker, because you can see that this right side of her face is much darker too. And we've got to basically darken that. Yeah, I know, I kind of said the same thing a couple different ways. But we're just applying this raw umber dark to the right side of her face here. The same glaze we've been using this whole time, and it's a cooler tone, so it works well. We'll also darken the shadow under her neck, but I want to be cognizant of a couple areas that need to be a little warmer in tone, and make sure I don't add this color to those areas, because for this area, like right up front here, we need more of a burnt sienna tone. So I'm going to leave that open, and I'm not going to fill in the whole thing. I'll just fill in that little section. Okay, now let's go ahead and let's darken her clothing one more time here. And to do that, I will take, let's take this brush here. This would be like a 3/4 flat. Let's take a 3/4 flat, and we'll darken her clothing. To do that, I'm going to take ultramarine blue and raw umber dark. So let's take raw ultramarine blue, raw umber dark, kind of mix those together. You already have kind of a greenish tint here, so I don't want to overdo it. So we're just kind of darkening the tone using something that kind of has obviously a green mix in it. Now all I'd have to do is add Indian yellow and voila, I'd get green. But I'm not going to do that because in the painting I've already got quite a bit of green present in here from the previous layers. And if we look at the reference photo, that is a very subdued green. So we want to make sure to capture that. Here it is on the white card. That's what we got. Let's test this out, see how it looks. I think it'll work. And we can go ahead and darken it. I think I will leave these areas kind of vacant. So I'm going to use a little less brush pressure right here, because if you look at your reference photo, you'll see that these areas are just a little bit lighter. And so as I brush, I'm going to kind of just lift off from that area. So let's do this. Let's actually start on the right-hand side where it's darker. Even though I like to work from left to right naturally because I'm right-handed, I'm going to work from the darker to the lighter area. Let's start below down here. We'll work our way up and across. So just kind of brush that in just like that, and doesn't mean you have to necessarily brush this way, though if you can, it kind of helps to be able to lift off from whatever side you want to build a gradient and shading. And that's one of the techniques we use for shading, is by lifting off with the brush pressure. All right, we're going to go ahead and darken this right-hand side here. Radiate out from the palette, lift it up. Now you can see that difference, right? All right, I'm going to have to go up to the other camera so you can see what's going on here, and just move it down a hair. There we go. You can see as we're lifting up that edge and difference between this glaze here we're applying and what we previously had. And you remember the color I showed you on the white card, that it wasn't green, it was actually kind of a bluish gray. So we're just in effect darkening this whole tonal value, still maintaining that greenish tint because it's underneath, and with the glazes the light shines through each translucent layer of paint, reflects off the white primer of the canvas, and reflects back to our eye. All right, so we reload the brush. Okay, we smooth it out by doing diagonal brush strokes, one way, then the other way. Now this is where we can lift off, use less pressure, and we don't reload the brush here. The amount of paint on the tip of the bristles are kind of exhausted. There's less paint on the tip of the bristles. We use that to our advantage. And we just kind of lightly feather it. Lightly feather it. We're almost doing a dry brushing technique. Now all I would have to do is squeeze, put a lot of pressure on the canvas, and all the paint that's here in the middle of the bristles would come out, just like I'm going to do right here. See, I squeezed it, and now we get more paint coming out, and we can kind of do the same process, because here I want it to be a little darker. Now I kind of smooth it out, lift off, lift away, and get a gradient. So using brush pressure is huge. I mean, that's a way to really develop some serious shading on your canvas. Get those wonderful gradients. I'm going to go ahead and just reload my brush. I can get a sense that I need a little bit of more paint on it, so let's do that. Just going to move this a little bit here. Okay, now let's go ahead and we'll darken her arm just a bit. Now notice I just brush it several times and really kind of smooth it out. Brush down here a little bit. Now you don't want to go over any areas that you've already done. See, if this is already starting to set up, the last thing I'd want to do is go back in there and try to brush over it and make it darker. We can't do that with acrylic. With oils, yes. But with acrylic, we're trying to use the fast drying properties, and if we are applying the paint straight on the canvas without thinning it out with matte medium, it would take a longer amount of time to dry, and it would be very frustrating because you wouldn't be able to go back on top with another layer. But with these thin glazes, this will dry in a matter of just minutes. 10, 15 minutes, maybe even less. It'll be dry and ready for another coat, another layer. And then you just cycle back. So while this is drying, we're going to work on something else. Let's just get a little bit of a glaze right underneath that palette hole area there. Let's also darken. Yep, let's go ahead and darken the paint brushes a little bit, because that's important. So I'm using my round brush for that. This is a small round brush. I think like a size 10. You don't have to use a size 10, just use whatever size is comfortable for you. Could be a little smaller than that. I wouldn't go larger though than the size 10. Now we'll go ahead and get the bristle end of it. Keep in mind that we're actually portraying the brushes in perspective coming out toward us, so we don't want to make that top really flat, like straight across. We want to have it at an angle, and that is important. Now, I always want to reuse the paint and utilize these opportunities here to darken certain areas. Like we want to go into the eyes and see, are there some areas that are darker in the reference photo that we can push this a little further along. We just don't want any part of the painting to be lagging behind if we can help it. So we're working everything equally. And the beautiful part of this method of painting, this kind of indirect glazing technique, is that we don't have to actually have a white section of the canvas staring us in the face at any one time. And if you're painting everything completely from left to right, all the background, all the detail, then, you know, working on a section of the face with complete detail, but then you still have like white down here on this portion, well, then you always know the painting's unfinished, right? And it's always staring you in the face, intimidating you, this white section of the canvas. If you're doing a portrait on commission, it's always going to look unfinished if you have a white section that's got no paint on it. But with this technique, you could have a painting that maybe is not quite as done as you would like, but if you're up against a tight deadline, you would be able to say it's done. And that's not to say that you shouldn't do your best work and push the painting as far as you can. You always do want to take it as far along as you can in realism, but there just are times where you have a tight deadline and you don't have to deal with that intimidation of having a white section of canvas when you're doing it with this glazing technique of trying to work the whole painting at once. So it is a great benefit. So I'm darkening certain portions here. I'm darkening, again, the hair with this glaze. I think the glaze that we applied right at the beginning is already dried, so now I can go ahead and darken some of these little valleys within the hair even more. And again, I'm just looking at the reference photo as far as my guide of what to do next, and seeing what areas I can kind of give some greater senses of contrast to. I'm going to darken this area in here a little bit, you know, under her hair, and just get that a little darker. All right, so this is good. Darken this little section here in her shoulder. That needs to ultimately get to a much darker value. And let's see. Yeah, I think we'll just kind of zoom out here for a second. I want to take a look at it and say, yeah, so it's coming along a little bit more. But this is going to take us to step number 2, where we want to refine some of the forms on her face and add some color. So let's do that. Let's refine some of the forms of her face a little bit. We're going to add a little bit more skin tone color to her face. So for that, let's switch to a flat brush, or you could use a filbert. Doesn't really matter. I'm gonna see if we can utilize a, yeah, let's utilize a flat brush, and this would be 1/2 inch, I think, is what we're looking for, or a little less than 1/2 inch, maybe a 3/8. And we're going to build up some form on her face. So for that, let's go to the palette. We'll take a little bit of burnt sienna. A little bit of burnt sienna. Swirl it into the matte medium, get a really nice mix. Just swirl it around and around till you got a good uniform mix. And let's just take a tiny bit of alizarin crimson. Just kind of, it's a strong color, so we'll just kind of slowly introduce it into our mix. All right, that's good. All right, so let's go ahead now and apply that to her face. We want to build up some of this form on her forehead. We're trying to get a sense of 3 dimensions here. And again, we have this lighter area in the center. So you want to pay attention to that, where it's just a little bit left of center. There's your highlight. So we're going to kind of swirl the paint around that area and leave it vacant there. And we darken around her eyes, darken this area. We're really looking at that reference photo, seeing wherever we have any highlights on the face. You have to kind of train your eye, but here they are, right here. See, this is where we have the light areas, here, here, and here. Forehead, cheek, nose, a little bit on the chin. So you want to leave those areas alone as you glaze, but you can glaze the other areas, if that makes sense. And with that, you'll be building up a sense of the form. Now, at some point, we'll probably need to add a little bit of naphthalene. We'll need to add a little bit of naphthol red to this at some point, or a pyrrole orange. But this will work for right now, the colors we're using here. And add just a little bit along the jawline, kind of cutting along that edge and radiating it up a little bit. I'm just going to zoom in a bit so you really can see what's going on here. Just dab it a little bit as well. All right, that's good. And now let's go ahead and we'll take a look at yeah, I think we could add a little bit of this glaze to the palette. Let's just go ahead and do that. We'll switch to a larger brush though. It's going to be easier. So take your larger 3/4 flat, rinse it off, and then you're going to dip it into your glaze here that we've got. And I want to show this to you here on our white cards just so you can see what that looks like as well. There it is on the white card. Right there. And let's go ahead and add a little bit of this to the palette while we have these colors handy. Just kind of glaze that where it's appropriately darker. You're going to keep that same kind of brushwork where we're going up at that angle. Just kind of blend it out a little bit. You can cut up along the fingers and darken around the hand. Try not to paint over the hand because we do need to get the wood to be darker in tonal value than the hand. And when I mean tonal value, I'm just talking about that sense of light and dark on a scale from black to white and everything in between. All right, so So that's good. Let's just kind of step back and see what we have here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do a little bit more work, and this is going to take us to step number 3, where we're going to build up some shading and color on her clothing, the palette, the background, and then I think we're going to circle back to a little bit more work on her face, just dialing in some of the nuances as well. But I tell you what, before we do that, I want to just do a little bit more work here on step number 2. Let's just dial in the color of her lip, and then we'll go ahead and we'll do some of that work on the next one. Let me take my round brush here again. We got a size 6, and let's work on her lip. We'll take naphthalene red and a little bit of pyrrole orange. These are two very vibrant colors, but we're going to need some of this intensity, I think, to overcome some of the sketch that we've got going on here. So let's take those two colors and just introduce them onto her lips. And by this point, you want to make sure that this is dry. If it's not dry, then just work on something else and come back to it. But I just want to get that color introduced onto her lips here before we move on to step number 3. So just kind of basically going over the lip area and introducing that color. I'll also add a little bit above her eye, because if you look at your reference photo, you'll see there's just a hint of pink up there on that upper eyelid fold, and we want to capture that too, all the way into the tear duct, and a little bit in the nasolabial fold. All right, just got to go a little bit stronger on this. It's going to take a few glazes to do this, so we'll have to be patient with the progress and just kind of be content with that first layer to set it up. It's all about foundations. Just like building a house, you can't go right in with putting in your kitchen cabinets and putting in the carpeting. You got to get all the other stuff up, get up your studs and get up your drywall and all those different things. But step by step, we're going to do this, and I'll meet you back here where I have just a kind of not a commercial here, but I'm just going to have a quick intermission. I've got to do a few bonus videos, just kind of bring the process along a little further. I'll meet you in step number 3. And with step number 3, like I say, we're going to build up the shading in the clothing, the palette, the background, and I think we might be able to touch on the face again too a little bit. I'll see you there right here in step number 3. Don't go anywhere. It'll be here just in a second. All right, let's work on step number 3. In step number 3, we're going to do a little bit of shading on the background, darker values of her hair and clothing, and then a little bit of a toning layer on the palette. Not necessarily all in that same order. We'll begin with a flat brush. We'll take a flat 1/2-inch brush, and with that I'm going to just do a little bit of work on her clothing to start with. We'll take some raw umber dark and a little bit of ultramarine blue. We've got a fresh palette here, and if your palette ever gets kind of muddied up, you can just put down a fresh piece of foil if you choose to do this palette setup, and then you still have all your colors on the side. You don't have to squirt new sets of colors there. But ultramarine blue, raw umber dark, we're just making a nice dark color, and maybe I'll just add a tiny bit of alizarin crimson just to bring that a little closer to more of a black hue. And some of the areas here are quite dark, on that clothing, so we want to get that represented. So actually go with the other shot. We'll start from the bottom and kind of work our way up. So we're going to darken this right hand side, We're going to darken under the shadows here of the palette a little bit. And yeah, we just want to make sure we get kind of a thin line on the bottom of that palette. So I'm just going to use the brush on the side to do that. And there's a little bit of a deviation in the shadow that we want to capture here. And we might have to dial that in a little bit with some semi-opaque paint because the shadow is just a bit off. But let's go ahead and darken. Let's thicken this shadow here by doing a horizontal brush stroke, just like that. And then let's go ahead and we'll move up to the clothing, to the arm rather, and just start to darken this whole area a little bit. And we'll radiate it out from the palette. Again, just kind of darkening this whole side, but I'm being cognizant of any areas that look a little bit lighter in the reference photo. And so I'm just going to zoom in a bit. I'm just going to scroll my camera over a little so you can see what's happening in the reference photo on my screen. Yeah, it's just a little bit lighter. So I'm going to fade it by using less brush pressure and kind of doing a dry brushing technique as we get to the top here. And I'm going to just go over this little spot here, her armpit area, darken that a little bit. And then the shoulder area as well with a slight dry brushing. A little bit of shading on this right hand side too, like that. Let's just zoom it out a little bit so you can see what's going on. Now I want to get a bit of a shadow right on the arm here. So again, using the same brush, and I'm holding it kind of at a distance. So you can see where my hand is at. And then I'm just using a 45-degree angle, so the tip of the brush is tilted in just to get that angle so I can just darken that crease of her armpit. Then I'm tipping the brush this way again on the tip of it. I don't know if you can see that. I'm holding it more at a distance and really wanting to just show that little aspect there. So if you let the tip of the brush dance along the surface, you can then get some really nice precise lines without having to switch to a round brush. And then you can quickly turn your brush over to the wider side of it and just lightly graze the surface. Just graze the surface of the canvas with little short brush strokes, just like this. And that builds up some shading. That's one of our methods of blending, is a dry brushing technique when the glaze gets exhausted on the surface. Now if you want to see how much paint is on my brush, notice what it looks like on the white card here, how little paint I have. And you can see it's just barely adding anything to the surface. Alright, so we can continue this process here, and we can add a little bit of shading to the interior of the arm, again just by doing this dry brushing technique where we don't have much paint on the brush. It's not a very good technique for brushes. It does kind of wear them out because that paint gets into the heel of the brush. So you'll have to clean it really good, clean it really well to get that out, or just get a new brush. I usually use some pretty inexpensive brushes for that reason when I'm doing this kind of part of the technique. Now we'll segue down and we'll get in a little bit of the crease here. There's a little bit of a pleating there we want to get in right here. just develop a little more form that way. Let's darken the shadow too right here. Push out with the brush. See how much glaze can come off the brush when I push into it? All that was sitting there that whole time in the heel of the brush, and now it just comes out when I push with some pressure. We just darken that thumb hole a little bit. And now let's use the same glaze or a variation of it to work on the hair. So we're going to pivot now to the hair, and you already have this glaze mixed. We might need to just add a little bit of raw umber dark to it and just a bit of burnt sienna as well to warm it up slightly. But we want it to retain that overall dark value. And here it is on the white card, just to give you an idea of what that looks like right there. I know I don't have all the glazes on the white card. I just try to show you as many as I can here. But let's go ahead now and darken some of these little interior areas of her hair, really paying attention to these precise shapes as much as possible. And we can also delineate with a little more precision the edge of her facial structure. So that's what we're doing right now. And I'm just going to fill this in and see where we have any areas that can get a little bit darker. I'm going to switch to a different brush because this might be a little hard to blend out. I'm just going to switch to this, this is like a 3/8 flat. Let's just use that for this particular area. It's not going to get us as much precision, but it is going to give us a smoother application. We can always turn the brush on its side to really get some more precise areas if we need to. Okay, so now we're darkening this whole section here. I'm looking at my reference photo constantly, just seeing what needs to be darkened and what needs to be left alone. As I add glazes over these areas, it just gets darker and darker in certain spots. All right, now we add a glaze to the top here. And let's add it to the shadow on the top as well. Here we go. A little bit darker up there. Alrighty. Let's add a little glaze in here. Darken that just a bit. Let's darken this area a little bit there. I'm going to zoom in so you can see it better what I'm doing. So we're just getting a couple little dabs in a few key areas. I'm going to just darken this right side of the hair a little more, balance it out with the left, and I'm touching on a few spots, like right in here. Here, we'll darken that a bit. Okay, so that's getting better. It's getting, the values are getting a little more pronounced now. I'll have to let that dry before I can add more of a layer to it. Okay, let's go ahead now and do a little work on the background while this is drying. Excuse me. It's got a little bit of this, maybe a little bit of that smoke. These Canadian wildfires are spreading smoke into Wisconsin, and yesterday it was hazy and kind of smelled like smoke, and I was breathing that last night while I was sleeping, so I just please Excuse me if I have a little bit of a rough throat here. Excuse me. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and darken the background a little bit. I'm just going to have to get a quick sip of water here. Let's darken the background a little bit, and we'll take some ultramarine blue. And again, a little bit of, yeah, maybe just a bit of raw umber dark, not much. Ultramarine blue and just a little bit of raw umber dark. So I'd say a ratio of 3/4 to 1/4. 3/4 ultramarine blue, 1/4 raw umber dark, and then some matte medium. Excuse me, to thin that out to maybe about 80%. 80% opacity, or sorry, 80% translucency, so 20% paint, 80% matte medium. Let's go ahead and try this out. Here it is on our white card, if you can see that. Let's move the camera down a little bit so you can see. Okay, here we go. So we just darkened it a little bit up here. That's good. We'll get a little bit more on the sides, down towards the bottom a bit. A little bit on the right hand side as well. All right. And maybe just a little bit on the top too. So we want to again leave that room for that slight halo around her, the lighter area around her. I mean, not a literal halo, but just, you know what I'm saying, just that lighter kind of highlighted portion around her. Okay, and bring it in a little bit. It's nice to have an area where it connects. It's, you don't want to have it where it's just like a area all the way around her, like where you don't have any blue parts that go behind her. It looks more organic and random if you can get kind of a blue section to go behind her. And it's okay to paint on top of your clothing because this is so translucent, so transparent, it's not going to really affect anything at all. So don't even be concerned about that happening. So we leave that little bit of the lighter area, a couple of dabs right there. And then we can come in with some warmer tints and kind of blend everything out with that, which I think what we're going to do. But first, let's go ahead and switch to the palette. We'll let this dry because we really just have to let that layer dry. And now we'll come in with the palette now with a glaze on top to kind of just tone it a little bit more, get a little more of a yellowish tint in these lighter areas, because initially we went across it with kind of a burnt sienna glaze, and now we need to add more of the yellowish tint. Burnt sienna is more to the red-orange spectrum of colors, even though it's more of an earthy tone. And then now it's time to follow up with something more yellowish. So let's take raw sienna, one of my favorite colors, next to raw umber dark. And I think primarily we just want raw sienna. Yeah, I think maybe we could add just a little bit of burnt sienna. And then I'd like to add just a tiny bit of pyro orange off to the side. And Indian yellow. Okay, be very careful with these colors. They're very vibrant. So what I'm doing is actually wiping my brush off here and just kind of lightening that, and yeah, just making sure that I don't have too much of that on my brush. All right, so now we bring this back in. Just bring this back in here. And then we'll go ahead and we'll just apply that to the top here. We're going to apply it right on top of the whole entire palette. So let's do that. Oh, and let's show you that on the white card. Here's what it looks like if you want to see. Yeah, we're just going to go over the whole palette. Kind of brush it vertically, horizontally, but you want to finish it more with the horizontal brush stroke. So again, make sure you use very, very small amounts of the Pyro Orange and Indian Yellow, or you're going to have a palette that looks way too orangey. So kind of double check your glaze on a white card. You can set up a white card yourself right below your canvas, a little piece of cardstock or something, and test your glazes before you put them on. So there we go, and that just kind of enriches the whole area just a little bit. And now you can see that as we zoom down what that looks like. It just makes it look a little bit richer, and now really matches well with those other tones we got in there. But there's more that we can do. I mean, that's, I wouldn't say foundational here, but it takes many, many layers to make this all happen. But I think right now we're at a good stopping point, so we're going to call this lesson done here, and I just want to say thank you so much. This is what we've accomplished today, and we're in good shape for lessons 7 and 8 still yet to come. So if you've been with me this whole time, you've done these previous lessons and you've put in the work on your own portrait, again, I want to applaud you for that and just say thank you so much for putting in the effort and not giving up, because painting a portrait is very challenging. That's why we call it the Portrait Painting Challenge, right? But we're going to continue on here. If you have any questions, need any help in your portrait, get in touch with me, leave a comment here below this video, email me, post something in our Facebook group, join the critiques that we have on Thursdays. So we'll have a couple more critiques here just to finish things up, and you can join that on Thursdays at 10 a.m. Central Time while we're doing this challenge. So you have 2 more opportunities to get in on the critique if you need some help with your portrait. But anyway, I want to say thank you again. Looking forward to teaching you more. Our next lesson, we're going to be diving in deep, going into working on the skin tones on the face. We'll probably touch on some other aspects as well. You'll see a little bit of a transformation on this portrait the next time as I do a few bonus videos that will be included in the Realistic Acrylic All Access membership. But I will be going over the fundamentals here during all of these free masterclass lessons for you. So again, thank you so much for joining. Like, subscribe, get in touch with me, share this challenge with your friends. If you just saw this today, you can still join the challenge. To do that in the link below. God bless you, and look forward to teaching you soon. Take care.